Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the December 10th meeting of the Salina City Commission to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Angel.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Householder.
Here.
Commissioner Shirley.
Here.
Would those that are able please join and rise me in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We start our meeting with the Citizens Forum. Do we have any citizens today that would like to come and address the Commission on anything that's not a part of the city published agenda for the meeting today? Seeing none, we move on to awards and proclamations.
Item 4.1, Resolution Number 126949, expressing gratitude and appreciation to Gregory Brockway for his employment with the City of Salina from September 16, 1983 to December 14, 2012. Item 4.2, Resolution Number 126950, expressing gratitude and appreciation to Janet Guerrero for her employment with the City of Salina from May 16, 1987 to December 15, 2012. Item 4.3, Resolution Number 126951, expressing gratitude and appreciation to A.V. Plank for his employment with the City of Salina from September 1, 1990 to December 14, 2012. Item 4.4, Resolution Number 126952, expressing gratitude and appreciation to Glenn Wendt for his employment with the City of Salina from August 16, 1987 to December 14, 2012. Item 4.5, Resolution Number 126953, expressing gratitude and appreciation to Robert Callahan for his employment with the City of Salina from March 16, 1988 to December 15, 2012.
And we can entertain a motion approving all of those resolutions together.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve resolution numbers 12-6949, 5051, 52, and 53. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries 5-0. And it's my understanding we have a few in attendance today, Glenn Wendt and Robert Callahan. We have something that we'd like to present to each of you.
That's Oprah.
Oh, that's over.
Oh.
This is hopefully on. This is in honor of your dedication and service to the City of Salina. It's been a pleasure having you here, and you'll truly be missed. Didn't see a name.
You'll be missed. You'll be missed too. Yeah. You'll both be missed. He did just miss you. Yeah.
Anything you'd like to say?
Not a word.
Not a word. What? No retirement plans? Nobody's got fishing.
Hunting.
Yeah. Find something to do. There you go.
Watch football.
There you go. Watch football. There you go. Hot rods.
Oh, there
Yeah.
you go.
Well, thank you very much.
She thinks you retired. Now you're cleaning the house. Now she's going to go out. Yes. There you go. Thanks, guys. Fantastic.
Item 4.6, the day of December 15, 2012, as serving from the heart of our Veterans Day in the City of Salina. Bob Wickwire, VFW Post Commander, will read the proclamation.
Mr. Wickwire?
Mr. Mayor, fellow commissioners, and distinguished guests, my name is Bob Wickwire. I'm the Post Commander for Veterans of Foreign War Post 1432 in Salina, Kansas. Joining me also is the President of the Ladies Auxiliary of the Veterans of Foreign War Post 1432, Mrs. Jean Albright. Our proclamation reads, whereas the Ladies Auxiliary of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States is conducting its 99th year of volunteer service in America. Whereas year after year, the organization continues to honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in the name of freedom by maintaining memorials to their service and sharing their history with our nation's youth so that our nation's veterans' service will not go unforgotten. The Ladies Auxiliary of the Veterans of Foreign War and the troops currently deployed overseas. Whereas the 500,000 members represented the families of those who are serving or currently on foreign soil protecting our nation's freedom. Whereas the Ladies Auxiliary of the Veterans of Foreign War promotes our American heritage by conducting an annual patriotic ceremony and providing financial assistance for the preservation and beautification of our nation's most treasured symbol of freedom, the Statue of Liberty. Whereas the members of volunteer nearly 2 million hours of Veterans Affairs VA hospitals and hospitals throughout our country. Whereas the organization provides awards and scholarships to students based on their emphasis on patriotism for the arts, speech, and volunteerism. Whereas Saturday, December 15th, there will be a time to celebrate her visit to Salina, Kansas. I do hereby declare Saturday, December 15th, 2012, as Serving from the Heart of Our Veterans, a day of honor for the National President of the Ladies Auxiliary, Leanne Lemley, and all members of the Ladies Auxiliary of the Veterans of Foreign Wars for their outstanding volunteer service to our nation and to their families. Thank you.
Do you have any activities or things that you would like to announce that are in celebration?
The National President will be here in Salina. She'll be arriving around 6 p.m. and we'll be hosting a dinner at the BFW Post. You're all certainly welcome to attend and would encourage you to come out and meet our National President. She makes a statewide tour for her year of service as the National President, so it's kind of a rare honor that she chose Salina as one of the cities in Kansas to visit. So it's quite a distinguished honor for us to host her at our post. So we're excited to have her there. We certainly encourage any of you that would like to attend. Dinner will be served right at 6 o'clock, and it'll be a pretty nice affair. Brief, however, we should be done by 8 o'clock, I expect.
Excellent. I have a signed copy of your proclamation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you for the service of the women of the
Exactly.
VFW.
Thank you, guys.
Today, we do not have any public hearings or items scheduled for a certain time, so that moves us into our consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of December 3rd, 2012. Item 6.2, resolution number 126955, authorizing a 3-year contract for the transportation and disposal of materials from the household hazardous waste facility. Item 6.3, resolution number 126954, authorizing the city manager to execute agreements with Bobby Hebert, Jr., Kansas Legal Services, and Richard Buck for indigent counsel services for the Salina Municipal Court. Item 6.4, award a bid for the Cisco Catalyst 4507 core switch to Velology in the amount of $41,558.50. Item 6.5, resolution number 126956, authorizing an interlocal agreement with Salina County for I-5 computer usage and service. Item 6.6, resolution number 126957, describing the corporate limits of the city of Salina.
Are there any items that a commissioner would request to be pulled from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda is read. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries 5-0. We now move into development business.
Item 7.1, application number Z12-7, requesting an amendment to Section 42-518 of Chapter 42, Article 10, Division 2 of the Salina Code pertaining to sign regulations in the University District. Sub-item 7.1A, first reading ordinance $10,664.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This item presents for you a zoning policy question, and that policy question is whether off-premise advertising signs that advertise businesses that are not located on the premises where they are placed should be allowed in the university zoning district, and on what basis. We've given you a little bit of background there as to the history. You may or may not recall that at one time there was a set of advertising signs or business signs on the rear of the scoreboard at Glenn Martin Stadium on Cloud Street at the Kansas Wesleyan campus. And there was some confusion at the time as to just how they were approved or not approved to be there. And the ultimate result was that there was a agreement reached between the city manager and the president of Kansas Wesleyan University that allowed the leases that were in place to be honored, and then requiring the sign to be removed at the conclusion of those leases. And they have in fact been removed, and if you drive by, the back of the scoreboard is blank and painted white. Earlier this year, the planning staff was contacted by representatives of Kansas Wesleyan University, and their question was, how could we go about legally reinstating those signs? And the planning staff reported back that the difficulty earlier was the fact that advertising signs, which is another comparative term would be also billboards, because they advertise a product or business that aren't located on the premises, are not permitted in the university district, and the sign rules applicable to that district would have to be changed through a text amendment. And so Kansas Wesleyan filed a zoning text amendment application, and they were asking the Planning Commission to reconsider the current prohibition on advertising signs in the university district, and asking that those signs be added as a type of sign that could be approved through a conditional use permit process. There was a hearing held on that. The Planning Commission gave general direction to staff to develop some language. The city's legal counsel has recommended that the specific language be prepared and brought back to the Planning Commission for them to confirm that it was precisely reflected what their recommendation was. As I noted, the original sign regulations, the ones we have in place, do not allow advertising signs. Primarily, those are allowed in our intense commercial districts and also industrial districts. However, this is a text amendment that would apply across the board to university district zone property that have scoreboards. However, the challenge for staff has been to try to draw the text amendment narrowly so it really addresses the specifics of this situation, and not just having a broad exemption that allowed advertising signs throughout the university district. So, as proposed, the amendment would add advertising signs to the list of functional sign types that could be approved under a conditional use permit. It adds scoreboard signs to the list of structural sign types, meaning that traditionally we have wall, ground, and pole-mounted signs, and it clarifies that a scoreboard can serve as a support for a sign structure, and then it allows deviations to the limits on sign size, sign height, and setback to be approved through or under a conditional use permit. You've got in your packet an elevation drawing of the proposed sign that Kansas Wesleyan was thinking about, and staff reviewed that. We determined that it was larger in size, had a greater height, and slightly smaller setback than what the current university district regulations allowed for. And so that is summarized for you on page 2 there. The Planning Commission conducted initial public hearing on this on August 21st. They were receptive to an amendment, but only if the signs were approved through a conditional use permit that involved notice to neighboring property owners. So they looked at the question of whether they should be allowed at all. Planning Commission felt yes, but only through a conditional use permit. Should they be allowed, or how large should they be allowed? They felt that they should be allowed to be varied in size, or that the signs could be larger if it was approved through a conditional use permit, and they didn't address the question of electronic changeable copy signs, so we're talking about static advertising signs. So they first voted to recommend that the university sign regulations be amended. They were receptive to a conditional use permit being granted for this particular sign if the City Commission were to approve the zoning ordinance changes that are outlined, and they asked staff to draft up the details of the amendment. And so this was referred back to them to review the specific language on the 20th of November, and we've outlined 4 alternatives for you on page 4 of your report. I would refer you to the colorized text that you have in your packet there. That highlights the changes there. The 3 changes are that the functional type of advertising signs facing outward on the rear side of a scoreboard structure is allowed conditionally, that scoreboard-mounted signs are a permitted structural type, and that signs that are mounted on the rear of a scoreboard structure that have a surface area and height in excess of the maximum size and a setback that is less than the minimum setback is allowed conditionally through a conditional use permit. So the question was looked at by the Planning Commission and by staff is how many more of these would this really allow. The only situation that we see that comes close is the St. John's Military School, where they have a football playing field and potentially a scoreboard where something similar might be proposed. The other university-zone property in the city is the former Marymount Administration Building and Kansas State University Salina campus. So really this presents a policy question for you as to what types of signs should be allowed at outdoor athletic stadiums that are located in the university district. And we have outlined 4 options for you. One would be to concur with the Planning Commission's recommendation and approve the text amendment with the 3 changes that are outlined. Under this alternative, a conditional use permit with surrounding property owner notification and public hearing would be required prior to erecting a billboard sign or advertising sign on the rear of a scoreboard located in the university district. So the Planning Commission would serve as a filter for that. You could approve the text amendment with any modifications or revisions you think are appropriate. You could refer this back to the Planning Commission for additional study, or you could maintain the status quo, the current regulations, which would not allow advertising signs, and the effect of this action would be to maintain the current prohibition on advertising signs, which would mean Kansas Wesleyan would not be allowed to place signs in the back of their scoreboard. This is, again, trying to address a text amendment that applies theoretically community-wide, but structure it in a way that really only allows for what Kansas Wesleyan is trying to do and doesn't open the door much further has been what the effort has been in terms of drafting the specific language. So with that, I'd be open to any questions that you have. Jeff Chapman from Kansas Wesleyan is here to answer any questions or lay out their perception as to the need for this sign.
Any questions of staff?
I guess for me, the idea that advertising on the back of the scoreboard makes sense. I'm wondering, well, a couple questions. Did Kansas Wesleyan kind of abandon the request for the electronic change copy on the sign, or did that just...
They were not asking for it as part of this sign because the Planning Commission had been looking at electronic changeable copy signs in the residential districts and also in the new public use district. We thought that they might want to look at the language in the university district, which currently does not allow for that, and neither Kansas Wesleyan University or the Planning Commission was interested in taking that up at this time. And so this, what you see in front of you, is simply for a static billboard type sign.
Just seems like it would be reasonable, because we allowed that in the, where the schools are, the public use, didn't we? Seems like we would allow the same, anyway, if it's not up today, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think the school's public use was only for school events. I can't remember back, did that allow for advertising or?
Well, it allowed for, it was, if you would have a, say, a stadium sign at Salina Stadium, that could be electronic changeable copy sign, it allowed for some of that message to be off-site.
Advertising, you mean?
Right.
Okay, oh, I would agree then, completely agree.
But
Yeah.
I wanted to make clear that we're, and I had this discussion with Mr. Bankston and to try to clarify the reason we're putting so much focus on the rear side of the scoreboard structure is that we don't regulate signs that are inside stadiums. So if you have logos or commercial things that are on the inside of the stadium in a scoreboard, or Dean Evans Stadium or East Crawford Recreation Area, and there's signs up there that are oriented to the spectators, those are not regulated signs. What makes this a regulated sign is it's oriented to the public on Cloud Street and other streets going up and down the traveled way, and it's visible from a public street. But the sign code does not regulate what's inside the stadium. It's the fact that we're trying to use the rear side of a scoreboard to advertise to the general public, not to spectators.
Did you have further questions, Commissioner
Well,
Angel?
is St. John's also then at the same zoning category as Kansas Wesleyan? Or were you just saying the only
Their
other?
campus is, but where their field is presently is on property that is zoned residential, so it would not be, but that is the only conceivable, unless Kansas State University Salina, for some reason, were to build some sort of stadium or area, and then they wanted to follow suit. But the idea with this was not to have an amendment that opened up university zone property for advertising signs, but basically to try to structure an amendment that if it was viewed favorably by the commission, that would allow them to reinstate advertising on the back of this particular scoreboard.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Gage?
Mayor, Dean, just for clarification, because what Commissioner Angel was asking about had to do with my questions as well. So what we're saying is that if you're in a university district, you would still need to be a university in order to take advantage and have signage on the back of a scoreboard?
You would have to have a scoreboard, and you'd have to have a reason to have a scoreboard. So if I was zoned university district, like the Highway Patrol or the Marymount Administration Building or St. John's Military, I would not be able to put up just an advertising sign. I would only be able to put it up if I happened to have a scoreboard.
So if the field for St. John's was in the proper zone, they would be allowed, under whatever the rules that might come about through the conditional use process, to have advertising on the back even though they're not a university?
Yes, because they have this is what applies to university zone
Okay.
property.
I'm assuming the Marymount College has historical university zoning. How does St. John's get that? Do you have any idea?
It's been in place since the district was formed, just as a campus, and I don't know why it's not treated, say, like the high schools, but it's always had a university zone designation since I've worked here. And
Okay.
Is
Just
that
maybe
something they'd have to come to us to ask to be rezoned as a public?
we could initiate, but you'd want to make sure everybody's on the same page, I think. in
When
doing
the
that.
city was comprehensively rezoned in 1977, the Marymount campus, the St. John's Military campus, and the Kansas Wesleyan campus were all designated university district, and have been so as long as I can remember.
But you said the field was residential.
That's
Well,
because
that's when it was moved.
Just
their field used to be on the south side of Euclid on their campus, and then they moved it to the north side
Right.
to some residential property, and they chose not to rezone that to university district.
And I probably guessed, but I imagine it came about because they're not a unified school district member. So what do you know, maybe under the, what do you call it, it'd actually be its own separate district.
My interpretation of this would be that if there was a field on the university district zone portion of St. John's Military School and they had a scoreboard, they would have the same opportunity that Kansas Wesleyan would to use that for advertising.
Yeah, I question that. I think the zoning is misplaced, and they should be in the educational zoning versus the university. But in the educational zoning, you can't probably have, I think you mentioned you cannot have the advertising on the back side of the scoreboard.
Right. You could have, if, the way it's set up is if at some point USD 305 wanted to put up an electronic changeable copy sign at the stadium, Salina Stadium, and advertise upcoming events and things of that nature, they could do that.
Okay. Given they're not in the right zoning district, they'd have to be rezoned anyway, so I wouldn't fathom they'd be rezoned for that purpose, given they're not a university. It'd probably be educational, if anything, but,
Yes.
so it's no harm, no foul, but that's
To clarify, it's
kind of a
not the
mismatch.
university
Yeah.
use, it's the university district. But it's probably a point well taken that St. John's Military isn't really the same as K-State Salina or Kansas Wesleyan, but it's a matter of historical zoning.
Further questions? Staff?
Thank you. I know Mr. Chapman may have something he wants to add.
Certainly welcome to come on up, Mr. Chapman, and hit the microphone if you have anything you'd like to add.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Chapman with Kansas Wesleyan, 100 East Claflin. This change, this conditional use, is basically to add revenue to Kansas Wesleyan, which we have not been receiving over the last few years. And we'd certainly like to begin that. We have advertisers that are interested already. We think we'll have contracts signed as soon as this would be approved by the formal process. I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Seeing no further public comment, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and potential action.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance 12-0664 on first reading.
Second.
For motion and a second to approve ordinance number 12-0664 on first reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carried 5-0. Moving into administration.
I move we recess into executive session for 10 minutes for the purpose of discussing matters pertaining to non-elected city personnel for the reason that public discussion of the matter would violate the privacy rights of the non-elected personnel involved, and reconvene at 4:40 p.m.
Second.
Mr. Bingston, is that time frame work?
For that one?
Apologize for the delay. Did I understand that the purpose described was personnel?
Yeah, the personnel, and then come back and request another one for attorney-client.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I was matching notes
You
with
want
the
those
city
separate,
manager.
Maybe do separate.
motions, or
That's certainly fine. It depends on how you prefer to proceed. But so I think if we do anticipate coming back and then going in for the attorney-client privilege, that would be, we can address the time frame at that time as
Okay.
well.
okay. So we have a motion and a second for, to move into executive session for matters of personnel for 10 minutes, returning at 4:40 PM. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries 5-0. We're now in the executive session. Executive session into our general session. Do we have another motion for executive session?
Back into an executive session, I move to recess into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss the legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and reconvene at 5:05.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to convene into executive session for legal attorney-client privilege reasons and reconvene in our general session at 5:05 PM. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Do we expect any action?
No, we do not.
We are now in executive session.